schools would knock this down. So this happened in the Netherlands. And they knocked it down, and then all of a sudden there was an uproar to say, Facebook, how dare you knock down such an important historical photo? So the point is, Eric and Chip, is that we understand speech through nuance of culture, of historical value, of the wars we've gone through, of the conflicts we've gone through that alter our perception of this. This is insanely difficult for any type of AI system to handle. Frankly, I don't think it ever will. And this is why Facebook's been hiring a ridiculous amount of moderators. But even that is incredibly difficult because, okay, we're talking about America. You know who's the biggest user base for Facebook is? It's India. In India, they have 11 different languages. Well, how can you create a system that could possibly understand the nuance of jokes that might happen, right? So Facebook and others, they realize they're in an extremely delicate position. And I think that's why they are actually hopeful that there's some level of greater governmental integration. And we've seen it really heavy with the U.S. and especially now, with Europe, and especially now with New Zealand, their prime minister really leading a charge. The Christchurch call that she had a bunch of leaders sign. The United States did not sign that agreement because of maybe the feelings around the First Amendment, which is not something that most of these other countries would have. But at the same time, I think it's going to be the wave of the future and something that we're going to have to deal with pretty soon.
Yes, both Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg have stated publicly that they actually want regulations to guide them on what they're doing. I think part of the problem is looking at Facebook and is it the public square or is it a media company? Yeah. And as a media company, they have the absolute right to censor what goes out on their network. If you give an interview to CBS or NBC and you're swearing, that doesn't get aired.
Well, here is an important part of that statement, though, Eric, right, is that I think everybody knows and is kind of leaning towards the latter to say, all right, let's be realistic. Since social media companies are determining, even through their algorithmic decision-making or editorial, they're determining not necessarily always freedom of speech, but what we like to call freedom of reach, right? And this kind of deals a little bit with like what was going on with Alex Jones. But basically, Facebook and other companies are constantly making decisions to determine what is going to go viral, right? Even just their algorithm is benefiting like certain types of actors that are then getting promoted, which then get more popular and then get more exposure. So everybody knows, okay, well then they're a media company. If they're a media company, then they can easily kind of knock off any types of speech they want. Here's where it gets complicated. The reason why Facebook and Google and Twitter have not been sued to oblivion is because there is an exception to the law that most media haven't been talking about yet, but I think they will be, is that Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act of 1996. So again, a law that was written before the founding of Google and well before the founding of Facebook. Yes. It basically says, it's a safe harbor act that says, as long as a platform is not the publisher, then they have safe harbor and they'll not be sued for their content. It's based on the idea that there's so much that's being pushed online that the legislative branch at the time said, well, it would be against innovation to hold the company responsible for every little dumb thing that got posted online because they couldn't possibly police it all. So as long as they're not a publisher and they're just a platform that's hosting it, then they're not legally responsible. And that's actually what, again, I wish the media would talk about this more because that's what's kind of going on. So that's why Facebook will come out and apologize. But the reason why they're not getting hit with multi-billion-dollar lawsuits is because they don't have that legal type of responsibility. This has recently chipped away about a year or so ago with Craigslist. A bunch of people were saying, well, wait a minute. It seems a little strange that we're openly allowing a platform to host prostitution, and that's what was going on, right? In the ad sections, the encounter sections, I believe it was. And then they say, well, okay, now we need to chip away at that law and say, we know that a platform is hosting something that is not something that we as a society would deem appropriate now. Therefore, we have to hold them responsible. So that was one little part they chipped away. But I think right now, people are putting a lot more pressure on social media companies to say, all right, come on, let's be realistic here. I know there's a lot of speech that's going on, but you have to have some level of responsibility. And going back to Facebook in Christchurch, this is where it gets really tricky because only about 1,000 or 2,000 people saw the video when it went live. But because they were unable to block it before it started playing, within 24 hours, Facebook had to take down and block 1.5 million copies of the video. In addition, YouTube, during that next 24 hours after the live streaming, they were taking down and blocking that video one time for every second. Every second that video somewhere in the world by a bad actor was being uploaded. I say this because it shows you what we're up against. And we are up against a massive issue of whack-a-mole, right? Where we're saying, wait a minute, we're building this so people can share cat videos and like talk to each other and connect and collaborate and speak across the world. And then it's like, yes, but we are also making something that's really ideal if you are a bad actor and you want to get your message out or spread a conspiracy or spread hate, right? So that's the issue that we're kind of dealing with. So frankly, I think my work is going to be busy in the next couple of years. Because,
I would think so.
Yeah.
I mean, we've also got a bit of a stumbling block because as you indicated earlier, Facebook, LinkedIn, Google, these are global companies. Well, we don't have global laws. It's different laws for different countries. And on top of that, if you actually watched the Senate interview, Mark Zuckerberg, it was painfully obvious that the legislators had no idea how the tech worked, what the business model was. They were completely clueless. So we're sort of relying on people that have no idea what's going on to make regulations.
That's part of the issue. And that's why a lot of people are advocating that we need a greater level of education for our legislative branch, because when you compare what happened last April with Mark Zuckerberg and like you're probably referring to like Senator Orrin Hatch, who said, so Mr. Zuckerberg, how does Facebook make money? I don't know. Let's think. The Senate is in charge of commerce, and you have Facebook that is bigger than ExxonMobil, and we have our legislative branch that doesn't know how they make money. Houston, we have a problem, right? And we shouldn't just pose it to them to say, how would you like to be regulated? If you could write something, like that we're just playing in the hands of lobbyists right there. I mean, that's terrible. So we need some greater level of education. We've seen a lot more activity in Europe. Frankly, most of the people I deal with are coming out of Europe, where there's been just, I don't know, they've just for some reason been ahead of the game on thinking a lot about this. I think that's also because maybe it's more natural to expect some level of integration. But I've seen a sea change in the average American belief, whereas a couple of years ago, give an example, Europe has the right to be forgotten, based on this idea that a lot of times there's something online that can really harm your reputation, and maybe it's misleading, and it just gets in the way of you getting a future job. Well, in Europe, they have a rule that you have, again, this right to be forgotten, that you can appeal to a court and to say, hey, this person wrote a slam piece against me years ago. It's not technically erased from the internet, but it's de-indexed from Google, which basically means that if it doesn't exist on Google, then it doesn't exist, because everybody just Googles everything. But before, when you'd ask the average American, they'd say, well, it's never going to happen in the United States because we give that control to the company, and well, if you don't like something, then you shouldn't have done it, and whatever, right? So that was the prevailing opinion, but I've seen that dramatically change as now we've kind of looked towards the European model, say, well, wait a minute, like these companies are benefiting. The joke I like to say is these engineers are, they're buying Teslas off my data. Like, what do I get, right? So there needs to be some level of trade-off, and also since other people can do this, So if Europeans have this right, then why don't we have this right? Maybe we should have the ability. And I think also, even though, yes, we give a lot of power to private companies, we would also say, yeah, but it's an American ideal to have reinvention. We love redemption. We love the Tiger Woods story, right? We love
Right.
the people who like fall down, they get in trouble, and then they come back. That's classic America, right? That's pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. But what we've realized is your digital footprint can get in the way of this. So maybe we need to alter that a little bit.
Yeah, we've only got a few minutes left. I do want to talk a little bit about privacy, GDPR, and especially Google this past week. It was revealed that Google had been tracking all of your purchases by reading your Gmail and all of the receipts that got sent in, and they kept all of that data. Now, Google's defense that they've used for years in scanning Gmail is that, well, people aren't reading your email. It's a computer looking through it. Yeah. Have we reached the point that no longer matters, that, it's just as bad having an AI read your mail as a person?
Yeah, I would argue. I mean, obviously Gmail is trying to say that hey, they're giving you greater benefit because maybe you're talking to your friend about needing a new lawnmower, and then all of a sudden you get a lawnmower ad. So on one hand, you could argue that you're getting utility from having this hyper targeting type of ad. But I think on the flip side, now we push back to say, yeah, but don't I have the right to be left alone? And I think we've seen the change, and I would argue again that, yeah, a machine reading our emails or language of what we're saying, this kind of gets into the Amazon Echo or Alexa type of issue as well. That's not something that we want. That's a dystopian future. And it's I think a couple of years ago, as these products were coming out, people like to say, well, privacy is dead. The consumer is just going to get so used to just constantly being tracked and having, a device that's constantly listening to everything. But then you're starting to say, yeah, but I want to choose when I'm public and I want to choose when I'm private. So for example, a couple of years ago with Google Glass, that was a great pushback of the consumer saying, all right, I get the cool tech part, but you know what? When I'm just like sitting on a bus, I don't want to be recorded. When I'm in a restaurant, and yes, I'm in a public location, but that doesn't mean that I would want to be publicly profiled or publicly pushed out or posted online. So I think we're starting to see the pushback of consumers to say, I still have some level of privacy. I still have some level of being anonymous, especially in my home, right? A person's home is their castle. We give a lot of say to say, you need to be left alone in your home. So you wouldn't want your emails to be fully read, and you wouldn't want, your conversations to be fully kind of analyzed. And that was another kind of controversy that recently came up, especially with Amazon. I think they even did have humans that were listening to certain conversations as more
they were transcribing them. Yes.
Yes, right. Yeah. And that obviously bothered a lot of people. They said, well, wait a minute. That goes a little too far from what we would expect.
So do you think that we'll reach the point where we will pass a GDPR type law here?
Yes. I do think so. Again, before we looked at Europe as, well, that's just Europe being Europe, and they're totally different than the United States. Sea changes going on. All the major companies flew out to France, and they've been talking to what's been going on. They're getting a little more active, I think, because they know which way the wind's blowing. In California, they are talking about a law that's very similar to GDPR. And I think as the American kind of system works, we use states as a laboratory to see what works. And then if it works, we spread that nationwide. So, I would think within a couple of years, we are going to have something similar to GDPR. In addition, what we've noticed is that GDPR, even though it's European, because of the interconnectedness, it basically applies to most people. And I think, frankly, what created a lot of confusion for American companies. But hey, I run an organization, and it's based in New York, but at the same time, I have people signing up from Belgium, from France, from wherever.
Right.
And that means that now I have to be GDPR compliant, right? So by the extension of the web, which webs up the entire world, GDPR, frankly, can start becoming more global in nature. And I think that's why we've seen Zuckerberg and others, and I think Jack Dorsey also kind of endorse it to say, hey, we're kind of actually going with this GDPR model. Again, they want the rules of the road. I like to say that companies like to maximize their profit within the confines